I thought Super Bowl weekend was a good time to let people know that while ignorance is bliss, it will become deadly when the dollar collapses. In the same time it'll take you to watch the Super Bowl, you could watch The Greatest Truth Never Told and see what's really going on in this world. When you are aware, you can prepare. Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. Aldous Huxley. While you are watching the Super Bowl, the Federal Reserve remains above the law.
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take.
Increasing our federal deficit, and uses fractional reserve banking, usury, and debt to control the world. The bankers continue to laugh at us.
Well, yes, I have to say it is fun being a billionaire. But
thumb their nose at regulators, manipulate the markets, lavish themselves with bonuses, all while claiming that they are doing God's work.
How do you solve a problem where you're spending 10% of, you're running a 10% fiscal deficit? You're not going to get growth in the absence of private sector credit demand. So the government's idea right now is we're going to export our way out of this. And when I asked a senior member of the Obama administration last week, how are we going to grow exports if we won't allow nominal wage deflation? And he says, we're just going to kill the dollar. And I said, okay, more you mean. So that's the only answer. And
that's a dead answer.
It's a dead answer, but that's where we're headed.
The elite continues to push man-made global warming with disgusting propaganda.
So, there's a brilliant idea in the air that I'd like to run by you. Now, it's called 10-10. The idea is everyone starts cutting their carbon emissions by 10%, thus keeping the planet safe for everyone, eventually. Now, this hasn't got to be a huge thing, but I would love it if you and your families would think about doing something.
What sort of thing, miss?
Well, like getting your dad to insulate the loft, or taking your next holiday by train instead of flying, or buying energy-saving light bulbs.
We're thinking of using our car less. I'm going to cycle to school.
That's fantastic, Jemima. Now, no pressure at all, but it'd be great to get a sense of how many of you might do this. Just a rough percentage. That's fantastic! And there's Nora. Philip and Tracy. That's fine, that's absolutely fine. Your own choice. Okay, class, thank you so much for today, and I will see you all tomorrow. Oh, just before you go, I just need to press this little button here. Now, everybody, please remember to read chapters 5 and 6 on volcanoes and glaciation. Except for Philip and Tracy, of course.
For environmental control.
Paper plastic.
Plastic. That's the magic word. Green police.
Cap and tax regulations and carbon Ponzi schemes. Our gangster government continues to lie to us about unemployment, inflation, the real healthcare agenda.
The truth is, and a candidate will never say, but what candidates should say if we were in a kind of democracy where citizens were honored in terms of their practice of citizenship, and they were educated in terms of what the issues were, and they could separate myth from reality in terms of what candidates would tell them. Thank you so much for coming this afternoon. I'm so glad to see you, and I would like to be president. Let me tell you a few things on health care. Look, we have the only health care system in the world that is designed to avoid sick people. And that's true, and what I'm going to do is I am going to try to reorganize it to be more amenable to treating sick people, but that means you, particularly you young people, particularly you young healthy people, you're going to have to pay more. Thank you. And by the way, we are going to have to, if you're very old, we're not going to give you all that technology and all those drugs for the last couple of years of your life to keep you maybe going for another couple of months. It's too expensive, so we're going to let you die.
As the middle class is being destroyed.
But middle class is suffering, but not only because we bail out the rich and dump on the poor and they lose their jobs and they lose their houses, but there's a characteristic about monetary policy. When a country destroys its currency, it transfers wealth from the middle class to the wealthy. And this is what you're seeing today, the elimination of the middle class. And it's going to get a lot worse unless we address the subject overspending, overborrowing, and printing too much money and understanding the business cycle.
The military-industrial complex steals trillions of dollars.
The day before 9/11, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld declared war, not on foreign terrorists.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy.
He said money wasted by the military poses a serious threat.
In fact, it could be said that it's a matter of life and death.
Rumsfeld promised change, but the next day, the world changed. And in the rush to fund the war on terrorism, the war on waste seems to have been forgotten.
My 03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
$2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America.
Commits war crimes, assassinations, genocide, and uses economic hitmen. Our government continues to protect heroin fields in Afghanistan, plot more false flag events.
Quote, the subject was how to create a casus belli between Tehran and Washington, he said. What you're writing there is that Cheney, there was a meeting in the White House where Cheney presided over, looking to cook up the next war, a false war based on false intelligence.
My oldest son is a lawyer, and when I sent him the story before it was published, basically in a final form, just a day, and he wrote back and he said, "You really buried the lead in this one." But casus belli. How many press are here? Anyway, there was a meeting among the items considered and rejected, which is why the New Yorker did not publish it on grounds that it wasn't accepted. One of the items was why not. There was a dozen ideas proffered how to trigger a war. The one that interested me the most was, why don't we in our shipyard build 4 or 5 Iranian boats that look like Iranian PT boats, put Navy SEALs on them with a lot of arms, and the next time one of our boats goes through the Straits of Hormuz, start a shoot-up. Might cost some lives, and it was rejected because you can't have Americans killing Americans. But that's the level of stuff we were talking about, provocations.
For the greatest racket on earth, war. Our government continues to bring drugs into the country and cause the violence in Mexico. Our politicians continue to be sock puppets for the elite that only give us the choice of the lesser of two evils in their rigged elections. Our police state and prison system grows more illogical, intrusive, violent, bold, and heartless. Our government uses Big Brother, Facebook, and Google to gather data on every single thing you do to control you. Our mainstream media continues to fool us and distract us with propaganda.
You said, talking about Fox and CNN and MSNBC, you said all the stories come from upstairs, even though the host pretend it's them. You know, people need to understand Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, and the rest of them. They're not these individual rogues setting their own agendas. These guys will deny it and say they have artistic freedom. You're either going to call me a lot. I'm telling you.
Wait a minute. So, in other words, you chose to talk about Anna Nicole Smith for a month and a half?
No, well, we didn't talk about the news and everything.
While World Trade Center 7 is still not in the 9/11 official final report. Our corporations poison us and others with fast food, aspartame, MSG, and fluoride. Our medical industrial complex continues to make huge money off cancer while suppressing cures and natural remedies.
Well, you see, the medical industry, just like any other industry, they go for the big ticket item, and cancer is a big ticket item. I think the average cost of treating cancer is $120,000. And the interesting thing about it is when you go to a doctor and he says, oh, you have cancer, They said, I really can't do anything for you, but I'm going to give you a lot of treatment. It's going to cost you a lot of money and a lot of pain. Your hair is going to fall out. You're going to wish you were dead, and sooner or later you will be. But meanwhile, we'll get all your money. This is called cancer treatment in the United States.
Our public schools deliberately dumb down, chemically sedate, and thoroughly indoctrinate our kids.
We're developing a society because of all of these different toxins known to affect brain function. We're seeing a society that not only has a lot more people of lower IQ, but a lot fewer people of higher IQ. In other words, a dumbing down, a chemical dumbing down of society. So everyone's sort of mediocre. That leaves them dependent on government because they can't excel. We have these people of lower IQ who are totally dependent. Then we have this mass of people who are going to believe anything they're told because they can't really think clearly. And very few people of very high IQ who have good cognitive function who can figure this all out. And that's what they want.
The elite keep gutting our manufacturing, overrunning us with illegal immigrants, and destroying real estate as China continues to grow more powerful.
And you can move your factory south of the border, pay $1 an hour for labor, hire a young 25, that's assuming you've been in business for a long time, you've got a mature workforce. Pay $1 an hour for your labor, have no health care, that's the most expensive single element making a car, have no environmental controls, no pollution controls, and no retirement, and you don't care about anything but making money, there will be a giant sucking sound going south.
The criminal elite pushes the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto on our road to serfdom while they plot to kill millions. The elite tighten their grip on your world while you just sit there and watch. You can ignore reality, but you cannot ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. Ayn Rand.
You're in charge of this thing called the United States government / budget, and it gives you political and fiscal authority to do, quote unquote, the right thing.
Yeah.
Would you mark to market balance sheets today and create the economic downside that would follow, or would you put in place or attempt to put in place some kind of economic policies to get you to a better place down some theoretical road?
I mean, how do you solve a problem where you're spending 10% of, you're running a 10% fiscal deficit? You're not going to get growth in the absence of private sector credit demand. So the government's idea right now is we're going to export our way out of this. And when I asked a senior member of the Obama administration last week, how are we going to grow exports if we won't allow nominal wage deflation? And he says, we're just going to kill the dollar. And I said, okay, more you mean. So that's the only answer. And
that's a dead answer.
It's a dead answer, but that's where we're headed.